they'll put themselves into this box of being a victim, and they think that it makes them like a good person because of it, that they're somehow above being a bad person, that they don't have to take like accountability for their actions anymore. And it pretty much guarantees them like a social group, and they feel like they're never going to be lonely or left out anymore. These people who are usually, like you said, these vulnerable girls who just like feel badly about themselves, what they really desperately want is a guaranteed social group.
Thank you so much for coming on Voices with Vicky and coming to hang out with me today. I'm so glad that I met you, because you are probably, of all the different people I've been talking to, you have a level of intellect as a trans man that is just, it's blown my mind. Some of the things that you've said to me in our conversations, I'm like, wow, you're so articulate. You are on point with a lot of these topics that are happening today. So I'm just really excited to have this conversation and be able to just sit and talk with you. Really, it's great. So tell me what's going on with you, and what's disturbing you currently about what's going on in the LGBT community.
First of all, I appreciate everything you said. It means a lot coming from you. Coming after that, the things that are disturbing me, there's just too much to unpack, especially when it comes to the LGBT community. Just the way that the left is operating right now is just mind-boggling. The fact that they're trying to erase definitions, that to the point that it's creating problems for people with medical issues, that is unacceptable. That compiled with the fact that the people that are doing this, they're only doing it for their own like political gain and like monetary gain. If you go higher up the chain, there's just no excusing it. Yeah, they definitely they want to put a band-aid on issues, and yet they also want to keep issues going. I think that's why they just put a band-aid on it, is because they need something to fight for. They need to feel like they have purpose in doing this, that they're serving this goal that is part of their ideology. Greater than that, it's all tied to this intersectional theory, social constructivism. It's like the Marxist, the cultural Marxism that has been overtaken the academies and just in general academics. It's all just part of the same virtue signal mentality. The identity is not even something that they feel innate to themselves. It's something that is innate to their politics. The talking points, the protests that they attend, it's all just optics, basically. It's mostly when it comes to trans topics, as that's what I've studied for the most part for 7 years about. Just certain things that are contradictory that are spoken on that side. So if pronouns do not equal gender, how is changing your pronouns trans? How is changing your name trans when somebody who isn't trans can change their name? How is any of that equal to that? Like, there is an actual transition in transsexual people and people who intend to become the opposite sex, people who have dysphoria. These people without it, they have no idea of the trans experience, but they want to be included in the community. The laws don't apply to them. They don't have any of the same experiences. There's just no logical reason for them to be included other than on the basis of inclusion in general.
Right. It's kind of like me saying, I feel like being trans, and I don't have dysphoria, but I want to grow a mustache. I don't understand the logic behind any of that, other than I just want to look different or be different. And what else is what's the explanation here? I just don't get it, because transition, you have to believe in the binary, right? You have to know that, like, so there's men and women, and if you're a man and you want to transition over to being a woman or vice versa, it's to me it's pretty clean cut. But we've introduced all these other terms and all this other language around it to encompass everybody, and this inclusion thing, the trans umbrella. And I just think it's maddening to me, because all it's doing is confusing the masses. It's pissing the masses off. It's making them very, very angry. And it's sort of putting real transsexual people at risk, who actually do suffer from gender dysphoria and have a medical condition that they're trying to deal with. And they're lumping all these people together and saying, well, screw all of you. And now it's leaking into the gay and lesbian community as well. I mean, people are done with all of this. They're done with it. And I can see why. Sadly, I can see why.
Genuinely, the way that the trans community has evolved past the definitions, past the actual diagnoses, it's gotten to the point where people are so delusional that it is affecting the LGBT, not in just the way that they're perceived as being paired with the trans movement, but also in that these people that are calling themselves trans are trying to get people that are in LGBT spaces to be with them when they have no interest in that. When it comes to that queer label and how they want to say that they've reclaimed it, well, first of all, most of the time, these people are using that word to mean that they don't even know what their identity is. How can you have reclaimed something if you never even called yourself gay? So people wouldn't have been calling you that, right? And second of all, how can you say that the community reclaimed it? Because I wasn't there in that conversation. Nobody that I know was there in that conversation. Who decided that? Who is the
Right.
the leader of the queer community? Like, huh?
It's almost has like a religious connotation to it. This whole it's become like this ideology, like a worshiping thing, and it's very cult like, because you have to believe in X, Y, and Z. You have to say certain things a certain way, and when you don't, you're ostracized from the community and you're not part of it anymore. So it's like I just see all these correlations between like religion happening and this. I think it's the QIA plus part of all of this that's really started to be a problem. Like I remember when I was young, so I was a teenager and just starting to really realize I was gay, right? That's usually about the time that you start to figure stuff out because you hit puberty, blah, blah, blah. And when I got a little older in my late teens, I met the very first person I ever did in my life that was trans. I had never known anybody that was. I had barely heard of it. And it was a little scary for me, to be quite honest, because I was like, I don't understand. Like, why would you want to like change your sex? Like, what? Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? It's so I understand that it's something that takes some education and understanding. But my point being, there were not all this influx of people deciding to transition. And now it's everywhere. And there's more and more people identifying with the community, either because they say they're trans or they say they're queer. And then we've put asexual people in this.
Right.
We've put intersex people into this. And those things don't really, even trans, I'm not even sure like how I really feel about the association with the LGBT. I mean, I know lots of very lovely trans people, and until recently, it was never a problem for me. But I think it's now because of the self-ID aspect that I'm like, this is just out of control.
They'll put themselves into this box of being a victim, and they think that it makes them like a good person because of it, that they're somehow above being a bad person, that they don't have to take like accountability for their actions anymore. And it pretty much guarantees them like a social group, and they feel like they're never going to be lonely or left out anymore. These people who are usually, like you said, these vulnerable girls who just like feel badly about themselves, what they really desperately want is a guaranteed social group. And so of course they're going to latch on to that, and they're going to latch on to the non-binary label because it means that they don't have to transition. They can just be themselves. But that just means that there's like a lot of things, honestly, that can constitute as non-binary these days, like just being an unconventional version of your birth sex, like just not subscribing to the gender roles associated with it. And that's most people. Like most people go through phases where they don't want to be stereotypical.
Yeah, I was always a tomboy. I've always kind of vacillated between some girly things and liking a lot of boy things, and I'm definitely a little gender non-conforming, so to speak. But I never felt the need to have to go out and announce that to everybody. That's just part of who I am, and people see that and can read that. And it is what it is. But for a long time, it was very trendy to come out as non-binary and come out with different pronouns and announce it on Facebook and tell everybody I now want to be called, she, him, or they, him, or it's just all these, and then they change it,
Right.
a week later, it's, oh, I don't like that one. And it's because they're being taught through TikTok and other, internet things like Reddit that, oh, well, it's a journey and it's an exploration, and it might change over time, and you can do anything you want whenever you want. And it's very dangerous, because again, it's hurting real transsexual people, and it's confusing the masses and making people say, I don't want to change my, the way I speak to somebody or about somebody just because you said I have to. And you have to remember too that when we walk the world, we're trained in our heads to look at people and as animals, and say male, female, especially women. Right, women have to be on top of it even more because we're the weaker sex, so to speak. When I walk around in life, I'm always aware of where people are and who, you know what I mean? You try to be because of people being predatory. And I think we're being told as women today to ignore your instincts, put them on the back burner, right? Don't judge people. Put your instincts on the back burner because you're being judgmental. And I fell for that for a little while. I was giving myself mental slaps when I'd be in a situation all of a sudden that I was uncomfortable with, like my instincts were out. And I would say, oh, you're being too judgmental. It's perplexing to me that we've gotten to this point. I never could have imagined. So 10 years ago, when same-sex marriage was passed and all that, I never would have imagined that we'd end up in this like mental gymnastics that we're in now with trans stuff. And I really think we have like Human Rights Campaign, GLAAD, all those lobbyist organizations to thank because they all wanted to keep their jobs. So they had to invent some other problems, and it became the bathroom debate became this huge thing. And let me tell you, back before this trans movement, there was no debate about the bathrooms. People went into the bathroom and they did their business and they left, and nobody gave a shit for the most part. Like, I mean, I think when people did care was when it was clearly a dude going into a lady's space and it made women uncomfortable. And if it makes women uncomfortable, if you're not blending in enough and you're making a disturbance of some kind, I think that's a problem. And I'm not trying to be mean. It's just the way it is. And I feel bad for people that are really trying their best to transition and acclimate into life as the opposite sex. But it doesn't. It's really hard for me.
Self-awareness.
Exactly. It requires self-awareness, and I think too that there are people clearly taking advantage of it. They're taking advantage of it. This thing with the Planet Fitness guy. Come on. Everybody knows that you're not a woman, and you're undressing and shaving in front of underage girls. Like, what part of that is okay? Like, what part of that is acceptable? Like, we all have the problem. We're the ones that have the issue. I don't think so.
Right. Like, if you clearly look like one sex, just go into the room that corresponds with what you look like. It's not difficult. It's not, as a trans person, it is seriously not something that takes up much time of your day. It doesn't take up much space in your mind to just go in, do your thing, and get out. It's not like it's how people are perceiving you. It's how you know that you are looking, right? Nobody is telling you, oh, you look like this, because nobody has to even be prompted at that time. You're gonna be told that if you go into the room that you don't look like.
Right. Well, that's the thing. That's like me walking into a men's room. I clearly am a girl, and men are going to turn around and look at me like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, why are you in here? Like, what is even transphobia? Because I feel like it's anything and everything.
Yeah, people call me transphobic for saying that somebody isn't trans for not having dysphoria and not transitioning. How? Telling somebody to not invade my spaces and not take up the resources of people with a medical condition is transphobia? In what world?
Yeah, no, everything's transphobia. Everything. I feel like just if you don't want to date somebody that's trans for some reason, because like especially if it has anything to do like uh, there's a lot of trans women who also identify as lesbians. And I'm sorry, but I mean, I guess identify however you want, but you're still a trans woman, which means you're a biological dude. So you're technically really not a lesbian. It's just this whole,
Right?
again, mental gymnastics. Yeah, and it's just this whole mental gymnastic thing that they try to play, and they say, oh well, you're a transphobe, Vicky, because you don't want to date a trans woman. And it's like, well, no, so now I'm forced to date people I don't want to date. Like, are you kidding me?
On that topic, so they can socially identify as a lesbian, whatever they want, but anybody who identifies as a lesbian is not immediately qualified to date any other lesbian. A lesbian can still pick and choose what lesbians they want to date. Preferences are still
Precisely.
allowed within a sexuality.
Right. It's just natural. You have an attraction to somebody or you don't. And people get rejected. And to me, that's what it boils down to is these people cannot handle any level of rejection. And that is part of life. Do you know how many times, like, when I was, dating still, or there might be somebody that I like, but they don't like me, or vice versa. And you move on about your business. It's just what it is, and it's okay. Not everybody is for everybody.
Yeah, it comes back to the conversation of wanting that guaranteed social space. It's where everybody's going to accept you and everybody's going to basically do whatever you want. And then with that, the lack of coping skills for when you don't get that. They're just removing coping skills and making it everybody else's problem. It's the cultural Marxism. It's the Americanized version of Marxism, where it's any minority group versus the majority groups. So it all connects. It's all that inclusive, intersectional minority group coalition of ideas. It all has to be, if you think this and you want to be like inclusive and accepting and tolerant, then you have to think this and you have to think this. So it all will connect at some point,
Right.
just because that's how the ideology functions.
Do you think that this ideology is just going to continue on and on, or do you think that perhaps it's going to get to a turning point? It's soon.
It's definitely going to continue. It just probably is going to lessen in its severity and how public it is. It's kind of like ideas, they morph over time, but they retain what they've always been. everything can be traced back like down to like philosophers in like the ancient times, and it'll all just evolve to this point. You can tie this back to like Orphism in ancient Greece, and it evolves into this, well, the separation of the soul and the body, and that then begets gender ideology all this way down the line. So it's just
Yeah.
going to keep existing and changing shape. What we're really looking at is there's going to be a pendulum swing where people are going to buy into that ideology less, but it's not going to go away.
Yeah, you're right. I think that the pendulum swing is, I think it's on the horizon, to be honest, because I think enough people are coming out more and more and saying, you know, enough is enough. We're sick of this, and we're calling out, especially the stuff about puberty blockers is all coming to a head now, and that was not the right move. I mean, if the trans, and this is never going to happen, but if these trans, ideology people that are out there and the activists just simply said, look, we we took this too far, we've made some mistakes, we need to backpedal some of these, we were wrong on some of these points. I mean, it would change a lot. I think people would calm the hell down, but I don't see that ever happening. I don't see them ever admitting to any wrongdoing ever.
I mean, I feel like when you've gone so far as to get people kicked out of their jobs, labeled them such slanderous things as being fascist bigots, you kind of have to double down on that. If you back off of that, it makes you look like a complete idiot because they are. And
Right.
it's just going to make them look bad. So they just keep going with it. It's when it comes to how people will try to say like, oh, these people, they don't even like you. Well, when I address people who are on the right wing about trans issues and I talk to them from my perspective, we agree on a lot of things. And even when they are transphobic originally, all I have to do is explain what actually causes the dysphoria, the sort of thing that people like to cover up. The Harvard Medical study, well, I don't know if it's the studies by Harvard Medical. They have a compilation of 14 studies on their website. If you go to those studies, you read through them, it shows you that dysphoria is caused by the gray and white structures, the density displacement of that matter in your brain is what causes you to end up feeling dysphoric later in life. So you have the brain structure of the opposite sex to your body. It's a binary thing. And when you explain this to people who are on the right, they're like, oh, well, obviously, yeah, if your brain is literally structured as the opposite sex, then sure, fix your body and match your brain, as long as you're not making it other people's problem. They're not transphobic at all once they understand. And they want to erase the science behind it, make it completely confusing so that nobody can understand. Like, you're just going to make transphobia even worse. It's going to persist if you're not making it accessible to understand.
Right. So you said these studies are on the Harvard website?
Yes, it's called Between the Gender Lines. That is the compilation. That's the page where it's found. The original article was removed, and people will try to use that to say that they were debunked. But that's one article, and there's 14 studies listed that were not removed. Nothing was debunked. It's just that one article was being misused. So, like, everything is still there. It still paints that picture, but they want to claim that it's debunked so that they can keep pushing their lies, their redefinitions. It's just foul, honestly, that they would try to cover up this information that helps trans people, would help people to not be transitioning if they're not trans. If there is that way to tell for sure that they are dysphoric, why would they want to cover that up? It's sinister.
Well, and that's the thing is, they've gone so far down the rabbit hole with the the ideology with children knowing that they're trans, supposedly. And that is I think the most sinister part of this, because you're putting these children on, they're saying they're dysphoric, right? Supposedly. And maybe they are. You know, when you're growing, you might be very well dysphoric. I think I could have been dysphoric at some point during my childhood. But it's a passing phase, usually, is what they're finding with kids. Most of them grow out of it. Occasionally, you don't. And that's when the studies that you're talking about really come into play. But they've gone so far down this rabbit hole with the children that that's another thing that I don't know that they will ever be able to back out of gracefully. I really wish some of them would be held accountable. Dr. Marcy Bowers is one of them, that trans surgeon out of San Francisco. She did Jazz Jennings surgery. She's done some other surgeries as well that were high profile, I believe. And, you know, she's operating on kids. Like, what the fuck is wrong? I can't even begin to tell you. These are experimental, dangerous surgeries. You know, a vaginoplasty is just, it's a horrifically painful experience. You know, you have to have enough, you know, skin down there to reconstruct all of that. And if
the puberty blockers actually creates an obstacle in even having that happen. It makes people who, if they were dysphoric as kids, they can't transition as adults because of that.
Well, that's literally what happened to Jazz Jennings. She had a micro penis because she was blocked so well from going through puberty at an early age that when she went to have her bottom surgery done, she had to have 3 or 4 separate surgeries to get it right. I mean, they never will admit it, and that mother will never admit it, that surgery was botched. It was completely botched. And to sit there and have a farewell to penis party on TLC on national television and make light of such a dangerous surgery that you're putting your son through,
right,
is the most disgusting thing I think I've ever seen. And every single person in America should be pissed at that. And to this day, she's still out there advocating for childhood transition and standing up there with Human Rights Campaign, doing her advocacy bullshit. It's terrible. And then you've got poor Jazz, who like is trying really hard to get through life and just wants to be normal, but they don't really know what normal is because they were raised in such a strange, like, ideological fashion. They
right.
don't
They never
know
had
any
a
different.
normal
They don't know any different
in their life.
And, you know, I don't care how many times Jazz said as a child, I'm a girl, I'm a girl, I'm a girl. You're still letting that child lead that conversation, and you're helping them make these choices that they should not have to make at that age.